the February 5th. So this is our 5th day of Black History Month, and we are charting our history. We are telling our stories, we are developing our stories, and all the great things. And we are using these prompts to do it so that we can chart our own historical timeline. So interesting enough, the question that we had for today was, what events happened in history the year you were born? And so, of course, I had to take a deep dive into do some research, as we knew we would have to. And I shared with everyone the prompt would require us to do a little bit of research. Now, what I discovered was very interesting, because I knew some of these things, but there was a lot more to it than what I had originally understood about 1963, key events in 1963. And as I did the research, I discovered that there were many things that happened during that time. And we're just going to walk through some of those things that I discovered. So one of them was the Children's Crusade. So something that happened down in Birmingham, Alabama. There was, institutional segregation, right? The national legislation was capable of eliminating legal institutional segregation, but somehow, things never went, things always went left with these marches. But we're going to talk a little bit about that. So movement strategists, and you all know what a movement strategist is, right? Movements are developed, or some group uh, group organizers who strategize to build out a movement to have some sort of direct action. And in this case, this was a campaign that was designed to break the practice in one of its toughest strongholds in Birmingham, and to garner some national attention in the process. The Kennedy administration would be compelled to draft comprehensive civil rights bill. So everybody all over the nation was participating in these direct actions to move or advocate for, for or against a thing. And in this case, it was for civil rights. And so there was the Children's Crusade down in Birmingham, Alabama, and to bring awareness, of course. And there was, of course, a lot of things that 1,000 students. I know y'all haven't heard of a ditch school day. Well, this was one of those ditch schools day, ditch the classes to march 2 by 2 on Baptist Street down there, and they endured arrest just like any other, movement, direct action during that time. This too was one of those same situations, and it involved children, and they walked out. So just wanted to bring you to some awareness. I have this backdrop. See, I was born in 1963 during a time of this time of civil unrest, right? And I have my own birth story, but we're going to continue to, you can see in my backdrop, these are photos of me and photos of my family. This is my tribe, right? So it's very important that we know our history. And so for me, going backward is helping me to delve into what I understand about history, so that I can leave a legacy for my children and my children's children. So if you are not documenting, this is a fine time to come along the journey with us, to, document your timeline in history, and what pivotal things were happening when you were born, or along the trajectory of your life. And so again, the Children's Crusade was one of those things that happened. There was also that I discovered in the research, was a mailman murder. I was blown away by that one. And this guy was U.S. postal worker William Moore. a member of the Baltimore chapter of Congress of Racial Equity and former U.S. Marine, embarked on April 20th upon a solo freedom journey from Chattanooga, Tennessee to Jackson, Mississippi. Moore stops at the White House first in hopes of informing President Kennedy that he planned to hand deliver his own letter, a letter in support of integration to Mississippi Governor Ross Barnett. And at the end of that march, at the end of that march, but Moore is not granted a meeting in Washington, but his walk actually attracts attention, pushing his gear in a postal handcart. Moore wears like a sandwich board, signs reading insect segregation. You know, he was in direct action. And two groups of movement workers sought to complete Moore's march, but were also arrested. And we understand that yeah, that he died during that time as well. So then there was the Woolworth. I don't know how many of you remember Woolworths. Woolworths was like our like today's how would I what category would I put Woolworth in? Maybe Target, or Woolworth also had a drugstore in it. So Woolworth was kind of like either your Dollar General, Dollar General, I would say Woolworth, except Woolworth had also a restaurant in it too, like a diner in it. And this was the year actually of the Woolworth sit-in in Jackson, Mississippi. You know, we hear oftentimes there's a lot of direct action that actually still happens in Jackson, Mississippi. You know, we often, when we think about these landmarks still have consistent actions happening in them as a result of their major work over time in the Black History Civil Rights Movement. And so during that time, there were those who sat in at the lunch counter. This was May 28th of 1963, and there was a sit-in. There was a sit-in of some, oh shoot, I'm sorry. It went out on me. There was a sit-in of a few who sat in downtown Woolworths in Jackson, Mississippi, and they were surrounded, of course, by a mob of people who poured, you know, their drinks and, you know, condiments and all kinds of things on them. And some of them were punched, you know, talked ugly to, and all those things. And the direct action really gave rise to mass meetings, mass marches, mass arrests, and, you know, iconic photographs of these protesters. So that was an incident that we keep that is documented in history and we often hear about. It reminds me of the Greensboro sit-in, which was not during that time, but it was during that era, but it was not during that year. So we're talking about 1963 in particular. Then there was, of course, there was a lot going on in Mississippi, y'all. That must be like really an area, one of the last areas, I guess, to, you know, to desegregate. Then there was the police brutality in Winona Jail, where the movement activists from the Delta returning from citizenship school training in South Carolina. That happened with the sharecroppers, former sharecropper and voting rights worker Fannie Lou Hamer. She was an amazing leader who suffered permanent damage from the attack on during that time. They were taken to an isolated jail in Winona, Mississippi, where they were brutally beaten. And among the group are the three local teenagers: Annelle Ponder, who was the field secretary, Lawrence Guyot, and former sharecropper and voting rights worker Fannie Lou Hamer. The incident drew national public attention and to the campaign for voting rights, something we still argue about and are fighting for today. We've gone, you know, we see right in front of us how these things, our rights, are continuously being stripped from us, all the things that we fought for. And we look and see now all of these things are, we've been gone back 40 years to those times when, well, actually 60, because I'm 61 years old. So we go back 60 years now. Going back, we've been fighting, for this that long. Um, Also, there was the John F. Kennedy civil rights speech. Now, I thought this one was good because it was a true tie-in to the largest event in the history of the civil rights movement, where um, I don't know, this movie that just came out. There was a movie that just came out that featured Bayard Rustin, and it was a movie that was directed by the Obamas. And Bayard was an activist, and he steered the event from to move um, this to have this largest march on Washington. And it was amazing because I was watching that documentary because I never knew about Bayard Rustin. I knew about these events, but I never heard of him. And Bayard, was one of those unsung heroes, those ones that they just do the work, right? They do the work and no one ever acknowledges them. And that's part for the course, because that's what we do as organizers. We do it because it's the right thing to do, and it's always the right time to do the right thing. And so that was a interesting finding of those two, and then to have watched that movie to see all the work he did was amazing, organizing all those people from around the country for this march on Washington, for the John F. Kennedy civil rights speech that happened during that time. And it was about the job rights, something that we still fight for, the wages, all the things that we are so unfairly treated. So then there was another important event during that time, and that was the assassination of Medgar Evers. Medgar Evers was murdered in front of his family, and he was the he was the president of the NAACP State Field Director. Medgar Evers was murdered um, after returning home from the President Kennedy's national address on civil rights. So there's such a tie into all of these things that were happening during that time. Then there was also, the march on Washington for jobs, freedoms, that happened during that time. No, this was actually followed. It actually followed the President Kennedy's address in June, and with the SCLC leaders and Bayard Rustin and all those guys. This actual incident followed the um presidential address on Washington. And then, of course, another thing that happened, and I didn't realize these all happened at the same time, but then there were the four little girls that were killed, in the 16th Street Baptist Church. What's so ironic about, or moving for me, going back over this timeline and this particular year of my birth, is it hits different. I'm 61 years old now, and this hits different when I think about how there was such a ripple effect. There's such a domino effect of things that were happening during that time that were trying to keep us oppressed. And we will never forget the four little girls. Now, I was born that year, but I've heard so much about this story, and it's good to reflect and document, and for me to reflect how it makes me feel as a 61-year-old female, mother, grandmother, all of the ebbs and flows of life, and to think about what we still go through, what we've gone through, and what we've come through, and what we still go through, are all things that bring up different feelings for me um, as I go back through these timelines. Things that I get to, I say, okay, there were when I think about these incidents, I also think about cause and effect. You know, what was the effect of these things, that happened? And they were many. They were many on emotionally, spiritually, physically, mentally, financially. The fight continues, and we really won the fight? Although we've been allowed to privileged to do, some things, but they found other ways to still continue to oppress. So there's all these thoughts that one has, and the reason why this is so important to me, because we are, as an organization, empowering our communities to build a well-being for ourselves, center these conversations, and what are they bringing up for us, and how can we heal together from what we know, right? And let's see what else. Okay, so also was the Malcolm X speech, the message to the grassroots, the people on the ground who were organizing. So those are also some things that happened during that time. He delivered this speech called Message to the Grassroots. And I have not listened to that, but I am going to share it on my page so that you all will have privilege to it. And I will probably maybe drop the link in this video description so you'll have access to it as well. And it's also, available for you to listen in the Voices of a People History of the United States recording. So I think that those are all good places to find it as well. So we'll drop that on you so you get to hear that. Then there was the freedom vote, freedom ballot, the freedom vote. One man, one vote. They talking Mississippi Party was fighting the campaign for one man, one vote. Again, we're down in Mississippi, still fighting for the struggle. Still dealing with the struggle of the ballot, right? Let's see, and that's what I had for you tonight. I don't know. Tell me what was happening the year you were born. So that was the assignment for tonight, and I want to give you tomorrow's assignment. And for those of you who want to join me right here on YouTube and ask questions, or drop comments in the chat. Tell me what you learned when you did your research, so that you can begin to have, discussions, right? Objective discussions, right? What's happening during that time? How does it make you feel? And then we never ever want to leave with feelings of anger, though. We want to deal with our feelings, because we want to get to a place where we can heal together, and that we don't um harbor, the bitterness for these people who ultimately have to pay for the things that they did. But that's God's justice, right? Because we want to make sure that we aren't hindering ourselves from the blessings that God has for us, because when we hold on to these emotions and these feelings, our bodies hold these emotions, and hold bitterness, and holds anger. It holds, anxiety and depression of the past, or anxiety about the future, right? Because that's what anxiety is. It's the not knowing what the future is going to bring, or depression from things that happened in the past, right? This is literally what that means, right? And so what we really want to do as a people is to make sure that while we understand our history, which we should, because we don't ever want anyone to blot out our history. These are facts. This is what happened. But we want to, we want to talk about them, and we want to be well as well, because we know the points, we know what we're still dealing with, and we get to pray about it. We get to stand in the gap. We get to show up here. We get to show up as responsible bodies with the moral, intellectual, and spiritual character of our Father to stand in our in these offices that we have to be, stand in our, go to our employment agencies, go to our elected bodies, or stand in our offices or on committees or wherever we are, that we're taking care of people. Because while we are to occupy, that is what we are intended to do. We are here to occupy until our Father returns. We're here to occupy, and we are here to occupy and represent him in every way. And that is his moral, intellectual, and spiritual character of love, pointing all things back to him. So I wanted to just share that with you. And then tomorrow's, we are writing about your earliest childhood memory of your mother. Earliest childhood memory of your mother. And then we're going to double that up because we think that you can do both. So we're saying your earliest childhood memory of your mother and earliest childhood member of your father. That's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. Earliest childhood memory of your mother, earliest childhood memory of your father. We're going to up the ante so we can move through some of these prompts, so since we're talking about mom and dad, we'll put them together. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, you are listening to the podcast with Preparing for Your Season of Elevation, where we are building out our stories and memoirs of our lives as we develop our ability to have economic stability in our businesses. Uber pick people up in our stories who can relate to our stories, share with them, and build power together. You are listening to Dr. Eve right here on Preparing for Your Season of Elevation. Until tomorrow, have yourself the most amazing day, and whatever you do, let no one get in the way on your journey to becoming. Peace and blessings, and until